بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. I want to thank the Khalil Center Chicago crew for putting this wonderful presentation on and for hosting me and giving me this opportunity to be with you today. Alhamdulillah. The topic is on the pursuit of happiness. And inshallah, what I'll be doing is telling you a little bit about some of the research out there, just a few slides. And then from there, I'm going to take it in a direction that's much more our Islamic understanding of happiness and how to attain that, inshallah. So first and foremost,
it's starting up.
All right.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. We'll be live soon, inshallah. We know that from 1960 until today, there's some really key changes that have happened in America. Materialistically, we're twice as rich as those who were back in 1960. But with that increase in material wealth, we have doubled our divorce rate, we have tripled our teen suicide rate, we have quadrupled the rate of violent crime, we have 5 times as many people in the prison population, we have a 6-fold increase in babies born to unmarried parents, and we have 7 times the increase of people who are cohabitating, meaning living together without being married, which is a predictor of future divorce, interestingly enough. And people always say, well, maybe the non-Muslims have it straight in that they know what they're getting into before they get into it because they actually live with the person. It turns out that cohabitation is actually an indicator for divorce, according to research, interestingly enough.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Inshallah. That's fine where we were. Hang on. Okay, so we were saying about depression. And that 1 in 4 people, actually we're over here, that 1 in 4 people will have depression in their lifetime. So all these stats that I presented clearly don't really indicate a whole lot of happiness. But your mind might be thinking, well, that must be the general American population. All right, in that case, let's take a look at American Muslims. The Pew study in 2007 found that American Muslims are less happy, on average, than Americans, regular Americans. Okay, spelling mistake there. And anxiety disorders in Muslim Americans show similar rates to the American national average. So it's not really showing that we're doing a whole lot better. And then the answer must be why, or the question I should say must be why. This is a poster put together by FYI, which I think is a wonderful infographic here, and a really disturbing one. Take a look at these stats, right? This is about Muslim college students. So for those of you who are either in college, or for those who are parents maybe sending their kids off to college, I would say that these stats, even though I went to college a while ago, these stats were probably accurate even in my time. And that's scary. Look at that, 50%. Is it showing up? Yeah? 50% of Muslim college students are likely to engage in premarital relations. And look at the number on the bottom, 50% in alcohol. Anybody shocked? No. Anybody shocked? Yeah, some people? Some hands? Okay. So that's what I typically get. I got some people going, nope, I knew that all along, and other people going, whoa, what happened there? And that's typically the reactions we get, but this really is very close to reality. And you look at the averages being 20% for illicit drugs, or I don't know why marijuana is separated from illicit drugs, in my opinion they're the same. Gambling, tobacco, right? All of these about 20%. And then you get the alcohol is 50. So if you have college students and you count yourselves off, every second person is somebody who will have at least experimented with drinking in college. And as we know, for some people this becomes a lifelong habit that does not go away, right? At least we know this in counseling that we do. Why? Why are youth having this kind of trouble? One would say, what's written here is lower religious affiliation. And the studies that have come out of Berkeley, out of Duke, so on, have showed that overall in America, since the 1930s, there's been a decline in religious affiliation. How many of you have non-Muslim friends? When you ask them, so what's your background? They just sort of say, I don't really have anything. I don't really follow anything. My family was such and such, but I'm not really anything at all. Now, how many of you have Muslim friends who say the same? Nobody wants to raise their hands. I think we all need to raise our hands, unfortunately. The reality is, there's a lot, unfortunately, of atheism and agnosticism at this time and day. I actually believe that this is our challenge today, is the loss of faith and the crisis of faith that we have. And that's really why the rest of this talk, in the discussion of the pursuit of happiness, is really built around the discussion on faith and how that relates to happiness. Let's talk about this term in the Quran. Falah. Falah is roughly translated as success. Also could be understood as happiness. They have a similarity in their translation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says those who prosper, those who will be successful, those who will be happy, are those who purify themselves. And here we're not talking about wudu necessarily. We're talking about a spiritual cleansing, right? So, for sake of time, I'm going to move a little fast on the slides. How do you obtain falah? How do you obtain success? Making good decisions in your life, purifying yourself, pleasing your Creator, and that equals falah. Okay, seems like a simple algorithm to follow. Not really so simple. So to break it down, what I'm going to do, inshallah, is introduce to you 7 principles. 7. We're going to go through 7 principles that the teachers of spirituality have said, these help a person gain success. These help a person attain falah, attain happiness. And we'll tie them back to the original stats that we first started with to see how far off we are from those stats. Okay? So before I go any further, as Muslims, what do we rely on in terms of Islamic information? What are our sources of information? What are for our belief system, what do we rely upon? I want 4 things. Quran, Sunnah, good. Huh? Hadith will tie in with the Sunnah, right? Because they're the sayings of the Prophet, and the Sunnah is the action of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Huh? Qiyas. What is qiyas? Good. What is that?
Understanding that consensus of understanding.
Exactly. That is the translation. Consensus. Okay. So actually, not a direct translation, but good enough, inshallah. That when the ulama had an agreement, consensus actually is translated from the word ijma', that they've had agreement on rules, right? And qiyas is when you take there isn't an exact ruling, but you're going to take the most similar ruling to it to derive a new ruling. Like perhaps back in the day there was, as we know, there was no stem cell research, right? Or stem cell need, or really anybody who's given a ruling necessarily on it. So you take the next closest thing to derive your new ruling. This is what qiyas means. Whereas ijma' means the consensus of the scholars, right? So this is essentially the 4 parts of Islam that guide our Islamic understanding and our decisions. Quran, Hadith, Ijma', and Qiyas, as we talked about. All right, I need to lay that foundation before we go any further, because then we're going to say, well, where did you get the 7 principles of success from? They come directly from these 4. So what are they? Our 7 habits. You know the book, 7 Habits of a successful person, or 7 Habits of a highly effective person? Right? Here we have the 7 principles or habits for the highly successful Muslim. Okay? All right, we'll do these one by one. Number 1, we call that wearing your akhirah glasses. I like that, wearing your akhirah glasses. Essentially putting on, just like for those, anybody here wear glasses? Yeah? What's it like when you don't have your glasses or contacts? Everything's blurry, everything's fuzzy. You can sort of see, but it's not crisp and clear. When you put on your pair of glasses, suddenly it all becomes very clear again. So all of us, even if we don't actually wear glasses, need to wear and have a pair of akhirah glasses, all right? That essentially is our perception, helping our perception of, and will help us see clearly in this dunya where we're actually going to end up in the akhirah. And unless you have and own a pair of akhirah glasses, it's not very likely you're going to fare too well in trying to get to Jannah in the akhirah, all right? So what do? The Prophet ﷺ once asked the companion Mu'adh bin Jabal and asked him, how are you? Simple question, how are you? And Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu responded and said, I feel like I'm a true believer. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him, what's your proof? You feel like you're a true believer? What's your proof? His answer was, every morning I think I will not see the evening. And every evening I feel I will not see morning. And every step I take, I believe that it will not be followed by another one. Oops, hang on. Oops, too far. There we go. And every step I take, I feel like it will not be followed by another one. And it is though each nation is kneeling for its accountability, and it is though I see the people of Jannah in bliss and the people of fire in agony. And to that the Prophet ﷺ said, you have believed. What does that mean? Imagine you have somebody walking around and at a simple question of, how are you doing? He answers all of that. These are the companions, Ridwanullahi alayhim. They're the people who are true thinkers, subhanAllah, who when the message of Islam came to them, they really stopped and took repose and really reflected on what that meant. They're people who are living in the dunya, fully living in this dunya. But their heart and mind is with the akhirah, right? Another understanding of what it means to have the akhirah glasses is what this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ talking about himself, saying, the worldly comforts are not for me. I am like a traveler who takes a rest under a tree in the shade and then goes on his way, understanding that the dunya is fleeting, it is ephemeral, it will not last forever, right? However, to be like this, to be this type of person, you really, truly, truly have to have thought a lot about what's coming next and be fully conscious of that all the time. Okay, Dr. Rania, fine. All sounds good. How do I do this practically? Okay? Practically speaking, let me ask you, especially for the moms in the room, and if there's any dads in the room as well. For those of you who have children, there's a couple of children in the back. If this young child, may Allah bless him, suddenly takes a knife from the kitchen, mom, what will you do? You'll just rush, literally, you're going to rush and get that knife out of that kid's hand. He doesn't know any better, right? And you're going to take that, oh, what's this, right? And you're going to, because you know the harm that comes from that knife. And that is how we all react in the dunya. That's all of us, that's our immediate reaction. Take that knife away from that child. But then I ask the same parent, parents, don't mean to pick on you, inshallah, same parents, what would happen if your child didn't pray? Do you have the same feeling? Do you have the same anxiety and that same rush of, oh, they're not praying? They may get injured by the knife and have a cut and some blood here in the dunya that we patch up and put a band-aid or even stitches if needed. But what of their akhirah? Parents are so concerned about their children's livelihood and their well-being and who they're going to become in the future for the dunya. But very often, there is this lack of insight and understanding about where their akhirah is going to be. We're not wearing our akhirah glasses. Everything's fuzzy. Do you see what I'm saying? So the very first principle of success and happiness that our teachers talk about is wearing your akhirah glasses. To have true happiness, as a believer, this must take place. All right, a couple more things. There's a beautiful, for those who are familiar with Sheikh al-Sha'rawi, who was an Egyptian scholar, who was a mufassir of the Quran. He was a linguist who was also someone who interpreted the Quran, rahmatullahi alayhi. And he had this beautiful saying, it was actually in reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can definitely use it as an understanding also of the message of Islam or of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he says, look, people will find themselves in darkness. and they're inclined to bring light to a thing. But everybody has a different ability of how much light they can bring to a thing. And so because we'll see this a lot. People will say, well, that message in Buddhism or that message in Christianity makes a whole lot of sense. How could that be if Islam is the straight path and the straight way and the message? And the answer to that is, look, every philosophy out there will have some good in it, absolutely. The question is, how much light does it actually bring? And what Sheikh Sharawi was saying, he says, and he gives the example of, humanity will find itself in darkness, but everyone and think of it as every philosophy, is able only to inspire as much light as it's capable of. So one person will bring a match, and the next person will say, no, we need more light than that, but they'll only be inspired to do what? Bring a candle and put the light, light the candle, and so it's more temporary. It's not as fleeting as the match. The next person comes along and says, what about a torch? That's going to light it even more. The next person comes around and says, how about a light bulb? And they invent electricity and they invent the light bulb, right? The next person says, well, what if I take that one light bulb and actually put it on a chandelier? Lots of lights. You see, one is upping the other, upping the next, upping the next. From the chandelier, think about the football stadium, where you're having a game that's in pitch black, dark of night. But the light inside of that football stadium is so powerful that when you're inside, it feels like it's daytime. Then he goes on to say, yet when the sun comes up the next day, even if the lights of the stadium are on, you have to sort of squint to even figure out, are the lights still on? They pale in comparison to this light that comes from the sun. And he said, the message of Islam, the Prophet ﷺ, is like the sun compared to the stadium lights. There is light in other messages and in other ways, but it pales in comparison to what Islam has to bring. Do you understand the simile? Yeah? I think it's beautiful, mashallah. And so here we say, wearing the akhirah glasses is fully understanding and believing that the message of Islam does have the answer to happiness. And fully understanding and believing that the Prophet's sunnah ﷺ is the yardstick that we all measure ourselves against and measure any philosophy out there against. Yes, those of us who are therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists, we've all studied Western psychology, great and fine, and there's good messages in that of how to be happy, how to have less anxiety, and how to not be depressed. But to be honest with you, what's there is either a repeat of what we find in our Islamic tradition, or it simply pales in comparison to what's already in our tradition, especially our spiritual tradition. So if you're thinking to yourself, why is a psychiatrist talking about the deen and the Quran and the Sunnah? Because to me, psychiatry is just great and fine. But it's nothingness unless you really tie it to something much bigger, much spiritual, much more spiritually inclined. Does that make sense? Number 2, retreat, reflect, and remember him often. Number 2, in the pursuit of happiness. Here we say that this is important for every person. Isolation. My psychiatrist friends would say, what on earth are you talking about? Isolation isn't healthy. In our tradition, a certain amount of isolation actually is. What is the term for it within our Islamic tradition? Khalwa. Very good. Khalwa. This idea of khalwa is not only meant to be in Ramadan. And for women, and I have a whole lecture on khalwa for women for another day and another time, is not only meant to be in the masjid. All right? For men too. Now, this idea of khalwa or spiritual isolation is very healthy because it allows you on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis or at the very least on a yearly basis to actually isolate yourself to some extent and then decide whether or not, and then have this time and repose and time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to really do full tawbah, to really reflect on your blessings. We're sitting in this building called Zakat Foundation, and we're surrounded with all these different posters of people who are in a much more difficult state than any of us are right now. Yes? I can't help but look, here we're looking at Africa, and here we're looking at Gaza, and here we're looking at Syria, and SubhanAllah, we think we have it bad? We think we're depressed or anxious? In May, I was in Amman working with the refugees in Syria, from Syrian refugees there in Amman. And I'm telling you, over and over and over again, every trip I've taken, it is amazing to me. I'm talking about squalor, incredibly difficult circumstances in these camps that they have, right? And yet you walk into these places, no electricity, no running water, it kind of really stinks, and there's not much anything in there. Yet they say, every single time I hear, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. I mean, literally, that's what keeps coming out of their mouth, And I'm just looking at them going, you have said Alhamdulillah more times in a span of 5 minutes of talking to you than I hear from most American Muslims who have everything going their way. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a paradigm shift. We really need a paradigm shift, right? Where they are literally able to count their blessings, and we truly are not. SubhanAllah. So we need to pull away every so often. We need to isolate ourselves and go through khalwa every so often. The Prophet ﷺ had different sunnahs or different habits between Asr and Maghrib, between Maghrib and Isha, after Fajr until the sun rises for a daily basis. Or on a weekly basis, it's known that Thursday night into Friday, Laylatul Jum'ah, is a very wonderful time to do this as well. Or on a monthly basis, there's special days. In fact, we just came through Ashura, right? We had some very important days in our Islamic calendar. And then on a yearly basis, you have Ramadan, right? You have Dhul Hijjah. You have these important months and times to really undergo khalwa. And I think this is really important because it helps you, all the noise around you, to dim that and to really reflect on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This helps in your pursuit of happiness, the teachers say. They say that it's exhausting work. Not just being out there and having a job, that's not what we mean just by work, that's exhausting too. But a mother with young children, that's exhausting. Every time I talk with all the women's halakas that I have, when there's young children involved, and I have young children myself, there's always this, I'm so exhausted, how could you even tell me to do extra dhikr or extra worship or extra any form of ibadah? It is so tiring. I feel you and I hear you. And it is a stage of life and it will eventually pass. But you must have something self-care for yourself, or else you won't actually find the happiness that we're talking about here, right? So tiny little moments of khalwa are very important. What else? When people say, okay, you tell me about dhikr, but what should I say or what should I do? I get this question a lot. And the answer is, think about what's easiest to think about. The bounties that Allah has given you, the beauty that is around you. I know it's a foggy day today, but yesterday was a beautiful day. There was a full moon. As you're driving, to look at it and go, SubhanAllah, and to reflect on the blessings that Allah has given you and His beauty, Jalla Jalaluhu. My teacher would often say, she has this thing about apples. She always says, an apple is an apple is an apple. But why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make a red apple and a yellow apple and a green apple? They're all apples. Yes, they have different tastes slightly, but why the different color of skin of the apple? There really is no reason for that in the beauty of the different colors of apples, other than it's for you. He created this Jalla Jalaluhu for us, to reflect on that and go, SubhanAllah, look how beautiful that is, for the people who reflect, right? Otherwise, He could have created an apple in any other color, any other shape, any other form, or just created one color. But those different colors are actually for us. This is what I mean by taking time to really think and reflect on His greatness. And then think about the people in your life around you, those who help you, those who hurt you. And then reflect on Him, Jalla Jalaluhu, and realize, like the Hadith al-Qudsi says, that if all the people of the world were to gather to harm you in any way, they cannot, except by the will of Allah. And if all the nations and all the people gather to help you in some way, they cannot, except by the will of Allah. The pens have been lifted and the ink has dried, and pages have dried, right? That is our Islamic understanding. And that is really important to understand, that as much as we think these fir'auns, these people, whoever they may be, maybe they're family members, maybe they're a boss, maybe they're a friend that's really causing you lots of trouble, and they seem like this huge fir'aun in your life, right? They're not bigger than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and He controls them as He controls you. And them hurting you or helping you is by His command only. And for those who reflect and take time to reflect, they realize that. And you find them to be happier, calmer people, less anxious people. What else? Seeking solace in service. Serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is number 3 in our pursuit of happiness here. Doing all forms of ibadah. First, we'll talk about serving Allah, then we'll talk about serving people. First, in serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people will say, yes, I understand. The scholars always say, do dhikr and pray, do dhikr and pray, do dhikr and pray. Okay, I'm trying my best to get my 5 daily prayers now. And in terms of dhikr, it doesn't really do much for me to just say, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah. I get this a lot too. We do a lot of teen halakas, a lot of youth halakas. And they're very brutally honest. They're just being very honest. This doesn't do much for me. I know you guys say this is important, but it doesn't do much for me. Okay, let's talk about how to actually make dhikr real and effective. The teachers say the best way to do this is to pick what's easiest on the tongue for you. When you sit there and you're about to do dhikr, what is the easiest thing for you to say? Is it astaghfirullah? Then do istighfar. Is it just simply saying Allah? Then just repeat His name, Jalla Jalaluhu, over and over. Is it saying Alhamdulillah? Is it saying Subhanallah? Whatever it may be. Is it saying it in English? There's no one said you have to do dhikr in Arabic, especially if it's not your first language. Okay? The prayers have to be conducted in Arabic, but no one said dhikr has to be done in Arabic. Right? Sit there and do it in whatever language and whatever comes to your heart and mind. Alright? Do it in abundance, whatever is easiest. But remember that whatever is the most difficult ibadah is the most rewarded. So I tell sisters like this all the time. You love shopping? Great. You went out and you found some great deals and you bought, 3 shirts. You know what's going to be really hard? Taking one of those shirts, brand new, with its tags, and giving it away. Brand new. Just bought it. You're excited to wear it. And taking that shirt and giving it away. Not the one that's already been worn and fuzzed out and so on. And you're like, I don't need it anyway. No, the one that you actually want to wear. And giving that away in charity. Does this make sense? That's what they mean by the hardest ibadah is the most rewarded. Okay? What else? Serving people. Serving people. Serving your parents, serving your spouse, serving your children, serving the people in your community around you without asking for thanks or reward. Because a person who goes about and does this kind of work, you have to do it anyway. Chores around the house, changing the baby's dirty diaper, right? Washing the dishes, loading and unloading the dishwasher, vacuuming. It's got to happen anyway. But if you sit there waiting for somebody to say thank you for doing that, you're not going to get the kind of happiness that they're talking about here. Doing things for others, serving others, without the need of thanks, okay, is understood in our tradition to be one of the points that allows your pursuit of happiness. What else? Number 4. Heed your healthy heart. Heed your healthy heart. First, the heart has to be healthy, which is why the topic of learning the topic of purification of the heart, which is an important book translated by Sheikh Hamza. Original author is Muhammad Mawlud, beautiful book, which was originally derived from all of Imam al-Ghazali's work on the diseases of the heart. This topic is considered fard ayn, personally obligatory knowledge in Islam. You have to study the diseases of the heart, the whole series of them, in order to help in purifying your heart. This is not, this is not extra credit. This is fard ayn knowledge. It's knowledge you must. This book has to be on your shelf, and not only has to sit there and collect dust, it has to be read and understood and studied. Okay? It has to be studied, because how else are we going to have a healthy heart? In order to heed it, it has to be healthy in the first place. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, heed the twinges of your heart. The scholars say that Sayyidina Adam, radiallahu anhu, when he was in Jannah, And the shaitan came and whispered to him. Yes? And told him to take from the tree. It is said that Sayyidina Adam said later on, after all was said and done, he said, I felt the twinge in my heart not to do that, and I ignored it. That twinge, when you have a healthy heart, that twinge is what tells you, probably not the best thing to be doing right now. Probably shouldn't go there. Probably shouldn't do that. Probably shouldn't hang out with those people, right? Probably shouldn't say that. Even though your friends are all kind of talking, and you realize that this is gossip and this is haram. And your heart goes, and you overcome it. The shaitan, right? Overcomes it anyway, and you say, blah, 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 blah. And then you regret it later. Heed the healthy heart. Heed that twinge that comes from the healthy heart, right? Because here, and you say, well, how do I know my heart is healthy? You have a healthy heart, if your heart recoils from things that are bad, from things that are wrong, from things that are lewd, right? It takes a stand when other people are not willing to take a stand. You know when to be, you know what's uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable with things that are lewd and that are inappropriate. You're not like, oh, that's cool, right? You're actually uncomfortable with it. And a healthy heart doesn't become addicted to anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a lot of work on spirituality and our spiritual cleansing that really helps us in becoming happy and healthy people. And many ayat in the Quran talk about this, and we have many diseases of the heart that I think really need to be studied and figured out which are our own personal diseases, and then work to be cured. Speaking of cure, how do you do this? Number 5 on our list of 7 is travel with a guide. Travel with a guide. This is a much longer discussion than we have time for today. But the idea in Islam is you don't have, wahi ended with the Prophet ﷺ. And he was sent, ﷺ, as our guide to help and have the message of Islam incarnate, right? Actually be able to see and show how you live Islam. When the Prophet ﷺ died, who are his inheritors? Who are the inheritors of the prophets? The scholars. Good. The scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. The last prophet is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But then who's going to guide us today in 2016? The inheritors of the prophets are the scholars. And the scholars then are meant to be guides to us, meant to help us travel on this path. All right? They help us because they have more experience and knowledge than we do, even if they're just a few steps ahead of us on the road. All right? Even just a few steps ahead of us, you could say, well, this is yesterday I was speaking at a masjid that had a young imam. And some people were saying, oh, he's wonderful because he's young and he connects with the youth. And other people said, but the older generation, it's hard for them to take from a young imam. Granted. However, age is not what's important in Islam. What's important is knowledge and experience. So if somebody is further down the path than you, then they are worthy of actually seeking guidance and help from. Because it's enough that they're able to turn around and say, hey, watch out, there's a pit hole, there's a, what do you call that? A pothole, thank you, didn't sound right. A pothole there, careful, don't fall in it. I just passed it, so I knew it was there. And I'm just letting you know it's about to come, so careful, take care. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why a guide is really important, because they're further along the path than you are. However, there are, of course, helpful guides, and there's very problematic guides, too. And here's a list of things that we should look out for. We should have more, he or she should have more experience. They should never be one-on-one. It's not a personal guide. It doesn't become a personal relationship, because then that's very cult-like. And Islam does not agree with the cult behavior whatsoever. This guide should be like a caravan leader who takes you from one place to the other. Their responsibility as your teacher, as your guide, is to take you from point A to point B. And then when they reach the maximum of what they're able to give you, they don't just hold on to you. They teach you and they free you. and they send you off to the next teacher who knows more than them. Do you see what I'm saying? That guy should also be the type of person who themselves has a teacher. Don't ever follow somebody who doesn't have a teacher themselves. Somebody needs to check them too, just like they check you. I'm sure in school you learned the phrase, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yes? So, you also need to see, and this is a huge list, we don't have time to read it all, but a very important list. And just very quickly read some of the things here. Do they push you towards their family, or do they take you away from their family? If they do, you better get far away from that person, right? Do they help you to become independent? Are they the type of person that asks personal favors of you? Could you pick up my laundry? No, that is not a guide. Right? You may be inclined towards doing khidmah or helping them in some way, but they should never ask for it. Do you see what I'm saying? Get far away from someone who's like that. All right? They should themselves have regular prayer and regular tahajjud, and they should never miss something like fajr prayer. I don't know what you're following a guide who misses their fajr prayer. Okay? And on and on and on this list goes. But the point here being, and this is why it's number 5, in seeking the path of happiness and in the pursuit of happiness, you really do need help from a guide. Number 6, make your house a home. This is probably one of my most favorite. And when my teacher talks about this is probably one of her favorites too, because she just will spend 3 hours talking about this one concept, and I think it's really important. There is such a thing as a house, and there's such a thing as a home. A house is a roof and 4 walls and a floor and a door and a window, and that's a house. But it is not a home. You see, these children that are in Gaza might be living in shacks without a real, true house that they're living in. Yet some of those children that come out of that can be some of the happiest children you have ever met. That despite having nothing and very little, depending on what it was like inside of that shack, they could have very fond and happy memories of their childhood and their life. If their mother, let's say for example, made them feel like they are queens and kings and princes and princesses, right, despite having little, they will believe that. It's amazing what children remember and what they forget too. That's amazing too. But let's talk about what they remember. Resiliency of childhood is actually, the yes or the no is an interesting discussion. But it's really interesting that you can say you and your siblings, if you had a happy upbringing, will remember all these wonderful things. We went to the pond and we looked at the fish and we saw the turtle, and do you remember this and this and that, and all this talking, and all us children, they reminisce together as siblings. And as parents, they may think, subhanAllah, that was a very difficult time in our life where we had very little. Yet the children remember it otherwise. Why? Because there were happy moments, and all the humum, all the difficulties of adulthood were not put on their shoulders. They were allowed to be children, right? So simple food is like a banquet. So if that mom puts out the simple morsels of things she has, but it's like it's a banquet, that's how the kids experience it, subhanAllah. Simple rags, like finery. The worst circumstances can be, but their fondest memories. Subhanallah, and all of you probably have stories, and if we have time in the Q&A, we'll talk about this a little bit more. When you have a home, it is a place where people want to come back to, even if it's crude or even if it has very little in it. That when the children or the husband or the wife or whoever goes outside of this home, they want to come back to it like a magnet. They can't wait to get back home from work. Yet I meet people every day who stay at work as long as they can because they don't want to go back to their house. Exactly. It is not a home. It doesn't have that feeling in it, right? And so this is a whole other discussion, much longer discussion of how to actually make your house a home. But remember, the people who come out, people who are very pessimistic, or they have a chip on their shoulder, or they're just very grim people, tend to come out of a house. Everybody there sort of coexisted together, but they didn't really live together. And those who come out of a home tend to be people who have a bounce in their step and are happy. Right? Truly, This is the case. So let's talk a little bit more about this, and then I'll move on to number 7 for sake of time. But in terms of how you clean your house and how you set up your house, have you ever walked into somebody's house and you have this feeling of tranquility? Peace, tranquility. It feels good. And so you say, and you can't put your finger on it, so you say, MashaAllah, I love your decor. And they say, oh really, you like my red couches? And you're thinking to yourself, I hate red. But somehow it feels so good and you can't put your finger on what it is exactly, right? They say, oh, maybe it's your curtains. And you're thinking, no, those are so old-fashioned, I would never put them in my own house. But it feels good in there. How do you get a place like that? How do you get a home like that? Because that person has loved their home. There's love in that home, in how they set up their house, even if you don't agree or like the decor. It doesn't agree with you. And it goes beyond just feeding people. There's love in how you actually feed. One of our teachers, may Allah bless him, said that the entire time he was growing up, the entire time, he would see his mother and his grandmother and the women folk of his house cooking. And the entire time as they were cooking, they were doing dhikr. As they were cooking, and as they were chopping, and as they were putting it, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, constantly. That food was cooked with tons of care and tons of love and the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is no wonder that his entire family is this whole generation of scholars, subhanallah, right? My teachers say, you guys have heard, you are what you eat. You like that? Yeah, you've heard that? You are what you eat. Truly, you are what you eat. And if there is dhikr and care and love and concern, it's not just about, is it the most organic and is it the freshest, and I'm coming from California, Bay Area, by the way. Everything there is organic, okay? We come from the land of granola moms, mashallah. That's not the point. You can get something that is totally non-organic, but that mom cut it and with such care and put it into her family with such care that love transfers through. You want more proof of this? The teachers say, subhanAllah, I love this. They say that, I saw my teachers do this a lot when I was in Syria. They'll prepare an entire banquet, like just tons of food, and the students were like, wow, what's going on here? I mean, talk about being when you're a student of knowledge, you're not focused on the food, and so you're not really eating much of anything special. And then they would have these huge banquets, and you're like, what's going on today? MashaAllah. And what's going on is they were inviting people who are not yet students of knowledge. They're not people who are really inclined towards the deen altogether. And you know this as well as I do. If you put food somewhere, people will come. And if you put really, really yummy food, you get a lot more people coming. And they would save the money, like little bits of money, kind of collect it together. And they would say, we pick the most halal of the money that we can have or that we find to purchase this food, to cook with it, so to invite the people who are the furthest away from Islam, so that la'alla wa la'asa, perhaps, those morsels that they ate from this halal food would grow cells in their body that are naturally inclined towards serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't that beautiful? And when something is haram, people say, well, why not eat haram? What's the big deal? When you put haram, you are what you eat. When you put haram in your body, the cells, like teachers of spirituality say, the cells in your body are naturally inclined, they're growing, yes? They're naturally inclined towards disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu a'lam. But this is this idea of preparing food and preparing your house. And really, and I love these 3 things here. These 3 points here of what the angels are attracted to in a home. In Arabic, we call them sitr, atur, dhikr, and yeah, it shouldn't actually say, it says itad, but actually it should be atur. That's okay. The things that the angels are attracted to, what do these translate as? What does sitr mean? To be covered, right. In Islam, there's a reason why we're so covered. All right. The angels are made from light. and they can do no sin, and they do no wrong. They are, you could say, in constant happiness and constant bliss. And they are in constant obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they encounter something that is disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or going against what Allah is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they flee. And so the uncovering of the awrah, which is the areas that should be covered, they get really bothered by this and they leave. A home that has angels in it is a home that follows the rules of awrah. And this is a whole other, covering the awrah, and this is a whole other discussion for another time, and I can go in more detail in the Q&A. The proper types of covering, even in our own home, especially when they're siblings, and especially as the children get older. Arta, what does arta mean? Perfume, someone said perfume. Good smell. Angels are attracted to good smell, and they flee away from awful smells, including the heavy, heavy smells in the home of cooking and frying and so on, which is why there's such an emphasis on cleanliness in our tradition, despite whatever cuisine you like to eat. So to air out the home and to clean the home, angels are attracted to this. Dhikr, we all know what dhikr means, yes? Remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Loud noising, slamming of doors and screaming and yelling and so on also just causes the angels to flee. So if you're trying to make your house a home, these are points that you really want to make sure you fulfill. Because it is, number 6 here, is one of the ways on our pursuit of happiness, according to the teachers of spirituality. Last but not least, commit to circles of concern, otherwise known as get your priorities straight. If we had more time, I'd go into these, you see these concentric circles? I'd go into them in more detail. But for now, it'll suffice us to say that when you get your priorities straight, you know what you should be doing first, then second, then third, and so on. You don't jump to the last circle and say, oh, I'm serving the ummah. You won't find happiness that way. You see, happiness is making sure that first and foremost, the people who are directly in your family, you are pleasing them, and there's happiness there. And if it means that all of your energy is focused on making your parents, or if you're married, your spouse and children happy, then that's where you need to be first, even if it takes years. That you should not be concerned with the affairs of the ummah and running around trying to help all these different causes when there's such discord in your own family. Does that make sense? This is our religious tradition. And this is what shows and actually helps us make sure that we stay on this in the pursuit of happiness, that we are happy, that we actually have our priorities straight. And last but not least, and our last slide here is zoom out or in, whichever way you need to, often. Look at all 7 aspects and make sure that you are actually fulfilling all of them. Work with teachers, work with scholars, work with teachers of spirituality, work with fuqaha to give you answers. Study your farad ayn, right? Work with counselors, these wonderful therapists that are here and counselors that are here. These are people who could really help you kind of align what you're doing, you're not doing, that's right or not right in the pursuit of happiness. And with that, I'll end so we have a couple of minutes for questions.